We're up and live so, for 24 seconds.
Pod on fire. Are we on fire, Rob? Welcome to the New Media Show. I thought it would be appropriate entry for today.
Right. Everything's burning down. Is that what you're saying, Todd?
Well, it might be the end.
Right. Right. Well, I think that's the feeling that I'm sensing in the medium right now.
Well, I don't know if it's the end, but there's a lot of people that are worried.
That's what happens when change hits, right?
It's self-induced,
Well, yeah.
To an extent.
I suppose so. Yeah. I think people's perceptions are what's driving it.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because, obviously just getting back from London and, I wrote a piece on podcasternews.com and also put something up on LinkedIn, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because I think it's it's too early to even I think what really needs to happen is that we need to remember that audio podcasting still has an incredibly large audience. And, we have great growth. We still have, overseas and other places are still growing. But, this little video conversation has got everyone a little freaked out. And, I was, my takeaway was a couple of things. And, I had the folks from Apple were at the podcast show in force, and they spoke for the first time.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they talked about 2004
Jake was up there.
Yeah, and 2004 was the biggest year ever. They paid homage to OpenRSS. They talked about other apps than Apple Podcasts in their homage to OpenRSS. And, basically said, hey, remember, we were responsible for bringing this medium to the point that it is today, starting 20 years ago. And, I'm interpreting a little bit, so don't shoot me, Apple team.
It's hard to argue with that point. Right?
Yeah. And, I had a conversation with the group, and it's not nothing. It's, confidential. They listen to a lot of people. I just can only imagine, you probably feel like a punching bag after you get done talking to 20 companies or whatever the, total number. But, I made the point. I said, listen, we need some cheerleaders for audio, and for people to understand the value of audio has not changed. The value of audio is still valuable. That that there is a segment of the population that listens and watches, and that we shouldn't be. We needed some cheerleaders. And, I want you guys to be and there's a great opportunity here. June will be 20 years since the introduction of podcasting in iTunes. So great time to be able to make a splash. That said, you can make suggestions, and you never know which way the wind's going to flow. In confidence, a couple of things was asked of me about some stuff, and I gave my feedback, and I understand that the wheels move slow over there.
Yeah.
And, what we want today, we won't see for a year or 2 years. That's just kind of the way it is. And maybe we won't see it at all. And that's all right. But I think in the end, we just need more advocates that are talking to content creators to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to start with audio. There's nothing wrong with starting with audio, but there is a trend that I'm hearing again and again and again and again. And it really kind of came to light in London even more. I kept being asked, should I do video? Should I do video? Should I do video? I don't want to do video. Should I do video? People are asking me my opinion. And these are relatively new creators. And, typically a year, 2 years, to that range. And I said, listen, I've been doing video for 15 years, but it's not everything. Audio is important. I said, ease into it if you want to, but the main objections really rolled down to, and I heard this more there than I've heard anywhere else. It was the women were saying, I don't want to be on video. Because of privacy issues. And I'm like, well, some people, if your show is talking about private, personal nature where you don't want to have your face exposed, then probably video is not for you. And if you're doing a show that's more adapted to video, maybe it works for you, So I said, you have to make that decision. But one thing was for sure, there was a huge contingencies of studios and networks there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all trying to dig into everyone's pocket to get business, production business, and video production business.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll help you with your video strategy. And the prices on that was extraordinary. Here I am in my booth, and right across from me is Canon. And Canon has a video studio set up with 3 cameras, microphones, everything. Of course, they have, $1,800 microphones in their studio. They've got $12,000 cameras in each position. They've got $1,000, and I'm like, you're scaring people, Canon. People don't have $50,000 or $100,000 to set up a professional studio unless they're a very high-end, well-watched show. So there was a couple other vendors there that had lower cost items, but, they're all doing the math, and they're saying, okay, I've got my $100 microphone. I've got my Rodecaster. And I've got an investment of about $1,000 into my audio production. Now I got to add camera, switcher, and what does that look like? Well, you don't look here, because
Well, Todd, you're an example of that. Going back 10 years.
Don't look here,
right?
So,
yeah.
So I think, the money and the time. Time was the big thing too. Was the guys didn't care about being on video. They were worried about the cost and the time commitment. Those were the 3 main concerns. And then, feeling like they're getting this feeling like they're being pushed. They're being pushed by the industry through everything it's being talked about. So, that discussion is just going to continue, the way it is. But I think what we have to be careful of, and I guess the Buzzsprout guys had I didn't listen to their episode. I think James did something on Pod News Daily, or I heard there was 3 or 4 podcasts that were basically, London bridges, falling down, that, and where's the audio discussion going? But, hello, where have you been? I think I'm the only one that's been talking about the audio space being flat. No one else has been willing to say anything. So
I'm not sure that there's a lot of honesty flying around in the podcast space right now as far as what's happening in the market. So I think that's part of it too. There's people that, have an outcome that they would like to see happen here.
But but the RSS
outcome that they would like to see happen here.
but but the RSS
That's what's driving a lot of this conversation about it.
Yeah, the RSS.com guys there, Transistor was there, Acast was there. That we all kind of met. Even run into folks, chit chatting. There's no those folks that are real active. They're not in a panic. They're how's business? Business is okay. Business isn't great. Business is okay. So from that perspective, I'm confident that. That there's no danger in some of the major companies going out. I think smaller companies are impacted or going to be impacted. But we had a board meeting last night, and basically we're talking about financials and everything that's going on with us. May looks better than January, so I'll just say that. It doesn't look as good as I want it to be, but June, basically almost into June. June's looking better than it was in January. So, from that perspective, and we're also being proactive too. So I don't know.
That's exactly what you should do. Right.
But at the same time, I was taking the point of taking show names down of people that were already in YouTube. I just, and there was maybe 20 that I talked to that had YouTube channels, and I went and looked their shows up, and nothing extraordinary. 100 views, maybe top 65 on episodes. So again, I think there's a divide. There's probably 3 tiers. There's probably the people that are doing a little more and doing great. And I think that's the way it is in audio podcasting too. There's a little medium, a little more. So,
and also to add another layer to that, there's those that are audio first, those that are video first, and then there are those that are doing a hybrid strategy of doing video and audio. So there's 3 tiers of content creators too, and each content creator has to decide which path do they want to go. And I think this binary choice between doing audio or doing video is kind of missing a piece here. And the video part doesn't have to be, $100,000 investment.
No,
so
it doesn't.
No.
But
that's what's being talked about in the context. Well, it's too expensive. It's actually not. And the only reason people are saying that is because they want to dissuade people from doing video.
No, I don't say it's. I say it is going to be some cost. You are going to have to have.
Of course,
you're going to have
There's
to buy
a webcam.
You're going to have to buy lights. You're going to have a camera of sorts.
Well, you don't have to buy lights, but
you're not going to have.
It depends on what your recording environment is. If you do it in front of a window that can give you natural light, that's possibility too. And you can do your show completely on your iPhone or on your Android device. You don't even have to go out and buy a new camera. So
again, I think they're seeing the examples of content and understanding they're going to have to invest. And that investment
that's a deeper discussion here, which is actually podcasting, and what's happening, what we're seeing on the video side is professionalizing, right? Which means that there are companies or shows that are becoming media companies. I mean, we all have to accept that podcasting and YouTube is the media now, right? And those expectations
I don't agree with that at all.
Well,
it's a portion of the media.
Well, okay, Todd, YouTube is getting more views on video content now than all of the other networks.
I understand that.
Streaming platforms
but
combined.
Rob, you're taking it at a macro level. Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm actually looking at from what's actually happening
Okay.
globally with video.
Again, but understand if you
Right.
are the average Joe podcaster. So the thing is, you're looking at these top ends. Again, we have to focus on the regular podcaster.
We don't
The
have to focus on that, Todd. That's what we're choosing to do.
Well,
But
we
that
have
is a
to.
factor here that the individual
So here,
individual content creator that's creating a show, right? The landscape for media distribution, monetization, marketing, PR, promotion, growing an audience is becoming professionalized. And the shows that are growing in scale and reach and audience, even on the audio side, it's gravitating towards larger shows.
So you made my
Those-
point exactly. So here's
I'm
the.
not.
So here's
That's kind
so,
of my bigger point, Todd, is that we're not actually looking at what's happening in the market.
So here's the issue.
Right.
No new creators are coming in. No new creators are
It
coming in.
doesn't change what's happening in
Okay.
the market.
Well, I'm
Todd.
just telling you that
I
this
get
type of discussion,
I get it.
this type of discussion is what's causing creators to say, I don't want to do it. It's too much work.
Well, it's because there's a certain amount of fear factoring that's going in.
Well, there's
here.
not fear
That's-
factoring.
That's if you do video, it's going to be overwhelming.
No,
You're
no,
not gonna be
no,
able to
no.
handle
It's
it, and it's too
no, nope,
much.
nope, nope. That's not the
Well,
conversation.
That's what I'm hearing.
Well, the conversation is, I'm being told I have to do video. I don't want to do video, but if I have to do video, I'm not going to do anything. People are not starting because of this narrative. You have to do video. So here's what the problem is going to be.
Why is that happening, Todd?
We have to have.
That's the next follow-up
Okay.
question here.
We have to have.
Why is that perception in the marketplace?
We
today?
have to have the ability for someone that's
Mm-hmm.
new to be able to come in and build a show and feel like they have a
Nobody's
chance of
stopping them.
success.
Nobody's stopping them, Todd.
That's the narrative that they're feeling.
Where's the market shifting towards, Todd, is the bigger question. If people are getting that perception, then that's kind of on them. There's a misunderstanding of what's happening in the market.
You told me it was fear mongering on the last show.
It is.
Then in
It is
then
fear-mongering.
in 5 years, audio podcasting will be gone.
No, it won't.
Oh, it'll be so diminished. No one will be left in 5 years.
Todd, but you also
Because
state publicly, no, Todd, you also state publicly on your own social media that audio podcast listening is bigger than ever.
Absolutely.
So it can't be both.
Okay. So the reason
It
it
can't be
can't.
dying and being
Okay. The reason
bigger
it
than
can't.
ever at the same
The
time.
reason it can be both because new creators are not entering.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that the medium is dying. Todd.
Okay, so what will happen is over time, again, 5 years over time,
Okay.
you'll see a drop off of all the smaller shows. And anyone under 10,000 downloads, they'll be gone. And there'll be just a small number, a very small number of successful audio and video shows, and the rest will be a wasteland. Because again, there is the perception by new
Right.
creators that this is too hard. It's too hard to break out, too hard to
Well, you
build an
know-
audience.
Todd, I've been around this medium long enough to know what the pathways have been on
Yeah.
this. There was a time in maybe 10 years ago that this conversation was happening around storytelling podcasts and true crime. And it was the same dialogue, right? It was, oh, those productions are too expensive and too difficult to do, and it's changing the podcast landscape, right? People are going to have all these big budgets to produce these highly produced audio series programs.
No,
'Cause that's what the expectation of the market
There was high.
right?
They do have a high budget.
Well, what's happening right now is that those productions are not finding a market anymore. Really, they're having struggles getting funded because everything is shifted over to monetization focus, and it's difficult to monetize a storytelling podcast, a true crime podcast. It's because it's intrusive to have mid-roll ads in it and things like that. So there's structural things that happen in the medium that change the narrative, right? And that narrative is happening again, and it just happens to be focused on video. And you and I both know that video and podcasting have been riding tandem with each other since 2005.
But at the
So-
same
This
point,
isn't a big surprise to me, and it shouldn't be to you.
so maybe in 2 or 3 years the fad will wear off, and maybe we'll be okay.
Yeah,
But-
I think that audio
but-
podcasting is still strong, right? I think we both acknowledge that audio podcasting is still growing, audience is still growing. It just so happens
Whoops.
right now that people are gravitating increasingly over to larger shows are getting larger.
Yeah.
And that's part of my bigger Uber trend that I see in the market of the professionalization of podcasting. And as we saw mainstream media kind of decline and fall off and lose their influence, guess what? That talent is moving over to podcasting, and they're carving up more and more of the audience. And I agree with you 100%. That is a threat to independent individual creators.
I
And then-
think though that we need to. I think it's a simple solution. To they're just people need to start getting on the messaging,
Right.
marketing and everything. That audio is still a viable medium. It's not going anywhere. We're still good. If
Yeah,
we,
no, I think that's a good discussion point, but I think where it goes sideways is we kind of demonize video.
I'm
And I
not
think-
demonizing video. I'm just.
That's what's been going on,
Eh.
Todd.
I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's like saying video's bad.
No,
People don't
we're doing video
people
here
don't
for.
really want to do video because there's all these issues.
If
with
you're
video.
18 to
Expensive.
35, you want to do
Right.
video. But again, there
Okay.
is a segment of the market that doesn't want to do
Right.
video, that
Right,
feel
so
they're being
just-
forced to.
Right, but you don't demonize an option that is part of the landscape of podcasting. I don't think anyway. Let's approach this proactively and say it's okay to be an audio first creator. It's okay to be a video first creator. It's okay to do a hybrid strategy. And let's push the success of the medium to those that want to create the kind of content that they want to create and not play one side against the other, which is, I think is what's going on right now. And I don't like it because it's not playing into what my experience in the medium is right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the ground talking with
I know you
creators
are,
every
Todd,
day.
and
So I can
talk
only
to a lot
tell
of
you
people
that.
too. I do calls
But-
all day with people all
But
around the world.
But I can tell you the mindset of new creators. This is what I'm hearing from new creators. So maybe that's just a subset. Again,
Well, that's one part of the industry, but there's also this whole other side of the industry that is already professionalized, right? And they're driving this change, right? Those
I
very
think
successful
a lot of the
shows-
monetization pieces are driving that.
Right. Those successful media companies, I would profess, increasingly that's what we're seeing happen. And that's why I take it back to this conversation that what we're seeing is professionalization of podcasting, which does tend to move the industry towards a smaller number of shows, which may be antithetical to where podcasting started as being an open landscape. And this is where it's so important now that the Podcast Standards Project gets its legs and really starts to drive innovation into RSS, because that's the pathway to us maintaining what we have, because we are seeing a shift into professionalization, which drives more attention to smaller numbers of shows into these big platforms. But that's being driven based on what the audience is doing. And I know that there's a feeling out there that creators are causing this to happen or someone else is responsible for this. No, it's the audience is what's driving this shift.
I'll just say I wish the PSP could move faster.
I know, I do
Yeah.
too. I do too. And I think they're on the right track. It's just,
There was a few comments from a couple of people at a couple of meetings. I was just kind of like, they don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
They feel like, I think it's just here, in the end, it goes back to, Blueberry, Buzzsprout, RSS.com, all the folks that are playing Transistor, that's playing in the podcasting 2.0 space.
Yeah.
We can do what we can do, but unless the apps follow, then it's
tough.
It's tough. So, Pocket Cast just introduced, Podroll basically made that available. So, little inroads here and there.
Yeah.
In the end, it's, there's this was a semi discussion around video. And, my point was, we don't need HLS. Everyone talks, we need HLS, we need HLS. I said, it's been working all the way up to this point with MP4. If someone wants to cache, take the media and cache it and create an HLS stream, that's great. But HLS
You
is
mean
so
a stream versus a download is really what you're talking
well.
about.
It all feels the same to the audience. They don't know they're getting an HLS stream or an MP4. They don't know the difference.
Well, the
It's-
question gets back to is the performance of the video.
It's again with the way modern connectivity is today. They don't know the difference. The majority of people don't.
Well, I noticed that there's a difference with the video, so there can be some latency on.
I think
on
what
playback.
I think what will end up happening is HLS is not going to be delivered at the price of podcast hosting. No way, because of the cost involved in HLS streaming. It just won't. It's right now, even to spin your own solution up, it's incredibly expensive to do it on that bandwidth is really, really high. And, the advantage Google has with YouTube is they have all their own pipes. They have all their infrastructure. They're interconnected with data centers. So for them, this is, they put the money into dark fiber and, they don't have to worry about this cost situation. But when you get down to an individual hosting platform.
My comeback to that is that by not doing HLS, we're shifting more control over to the big consumption platforms.
Again, we've been serving video since the beginning here with no issue, no complaints from the consumption audience. So, HLS, if we figure out a way to do it that's not so expensive, great. Maybe.
Yeah, but all these platforms are not going to. Apple would be the exception, and probably Pocket Casts. They're all going to want to support a central distribution of HLS streams. If we're going to maintain that kind of central hosting capability into all the platforms, whether it be Apple or Spotify or whatever, that is, as we look to the future, that is our leverage in the market.
Those apps are not making any money to begin with, so I don't know how HLS is going to have to be delivered on their side. They're going to have to cache
and
the
we're
video.
Shifting the burden of the distribution over to the consumption platforms, and that's antithetical to the future of RSS.
Again, I wouldn't be against someone taking video and caching it and serving it as HLS, as long as they sent the signal back. Yeah. Considering, I do that. I know what the math is on this. So, you're not going to get a host to provide HLS video streams at what people will consider an acceptable price to pay for that delivery. If they're willing to pay for the delivery, great. We can do HLS. But hold on to your wallet. It's not cheap. That's the thing. Even if you build your own infrastructure.
See, Todd, I think we have to think about this.
I can do it right today.
What does this look like in the future is the question.
Well, the question then is, the real question is, if, and I don't know if there's an answer for this, if people want to, here's the thing I said to Apple. If you have video make video a first class citizen on Apple Podcasts, everyone will want to have video on Apple Podcasts. That's simple.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that.
They want it. They'll call me tomorrow, said, I want video on Apple Podcast. And a certain segment will pay that price. If they want HLS, they're going to pay that price for that bill to have that media go to Apple. Some won't because it's free. at YouTube. It's free at Spotify
And why is it free, Todd?
because they have huge infrastructure. They control the ecosystem.
And they monetize.
But yeah, and that's the price of admission. And that's why that was another discussion. Podcasters are so pissed off about content being monetized around their content that they're starting to think, do I need to pull off Spotify? I'm like, hey, it's your decision if you want to be there or not. I had about
Right.
5 conversations around that.
Yeah.
And of course, people were not educated on the video overlap and the audio thing. That's a whole nother discussion. But
Well, and then the whole conversation around dynamic insertion of sponsor messages into video.
yeah,
too.
not
I mean,
not
we haven't even
complicated.
progressed to that conversation yet.
It's not that complicated. You just got to implement it.
No, I know it's not, but podcasting really has no connection to video monetization.
No.
I mean, other than baked in host
So,
rates.
and again, now go back to a stat I've said for years and years and years. 90% of podcasters will not ever need to rebuild their video or audio. 10% will, but the other 90%, there's no need.
So when you say rebuild, what does that mean?
Yeah, if you're doing it manually, which would be nuts on video, but you know,
You mean putting ads in?
yeah, if you change
That's what you're
ads
talking
out, yeah,
Okay.
using DVI on
Yeah.
on video, 90% of shows won't need it anyway. But again, I think so. So what happens? Let's just use a hypothetical here. If and again, this is wishful thinking. What if Apple says, "Oh yeah, we're going to support video, make it a first-class citizen. We'll cache your MP4, change it into HLS, and serve it." Now, I think the majority of people would say, "Yay," because of the cost involved. I think there's a lot of hosts that are scared about the video hosting costs. I know what it costs to deliver MP4 stuff. It's very simple. Size of file by your gigabit price. It's an easy math solution. It's simple math. And HLS, that's a tier 4, 5, 10 higher in cost. So if Apple did that, which again, that's just Todd talking. If they gave me a ping back and said, "Hey, play happened," hey, we're good. We can measure it, and we can do well with it. But what do you give up? You give up the ability to, there's a monetization issue. There's no pass through. So there's all these problems. So if you decide, okay, we're going to serve at HLS, there's a trade off. If they cache it, change it to HLS, cost $0. If you want to have HLS streaming and you want to be able to place ads in it and you want to do all this stuff, you're going to pay, and it's going to be big. It's not going to be small. Well,
I've heard, Todd, I've heard conflicting information from hosts out there about the cost of HLS. I've heard people tell me, and then I hear other people tell me, some people tell me that it's not that expensive if you have HLS on your own infrastructure.
You have to
But
have
it's
it on you.
expensive if you
Right.
outsource it to like an Amazon
Yeah,
Web
but
Services or
If you
or
have
those
to
kind of
build
stuff.
your own infrastructure, there is significant overhead on all those servers to do that. Absolutely. It can be built on your own infrastructure. But again, you're paying for that infrastructure, which will not be inexpensive. I look at
compared
this,
to what, Todd?
everything. Audio is simple, as compared to video. From
Well-
audio is a no-brainer from a serving standpoint. But if you want to
But
look
I
at,
think to be fair about it is the costs of audio hosting have plummeted.
but if you want to
So-
do video,
Right.
it's at least a factor of 25 or 30 in cost.
No, I'm not hearing that, Todd, from
Okay.
other people that I talk to.
Okay,
So-
then they're not moving.
No, it's all about moving big scale. That's
Yeah.
how you get the lower cost.
Right. On HLS, you would be doing your own because that's the only way you can do it and even probably make it even effective from a cost standpoint. We priced it out. We did the math on it and seen how many servers we're going to need just to host the shows we have now. I have to come in and charge it a much, 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 much higher rate.
So you're talking to CDNs?
You don't want, if you're going to do HLS, you're going to go through a CDN. You're going to, oh my God. You have to be your own CDN. You have to build your own infrastructure if you're going to do HLS.
Okay.
To-
So you have to actually physically own the servers.
Well, you spin them up in AWS, and
Right.
yeah.
So that's essentially a CDN type of
Not
infrastructure.
really. CDN is a centralized distribution network. You
No,
go
I get-
from
I
one
totally
to
get what it is.
one
Yeah.
to 500 different sites. We're talking about if you're going to do HLS as a hosting provider, you're going to have 4 or 5, a dozen
Of your
server.
own, right.
Yeah.
Dedicated servers that are on either your own co-located facility or in a leased co-located.
Oh, it's going to
facility.
be in AWS or whatever. You're not going to put a server in a facility anymore. No one does that. Hard iron. Very few people do that.
Well,
But you still,
I believe it.
you still have outbound. You got that outbound bandwidth that happens. You got the cost of the server. You got the cost of the overhead to do the encoding, all that stuff. Yeah, it's a price.
well, then the cost of audio podcast hosting has not gone up either, right?
No, but everything else around the thing is, okay, this is the problem. Yeah,
This is
my
the point.
my
This is the
bandwidth
point.
costs are the same, but my insurance, my health care,
No, I get that.
Yeah.
No, that's all separate from what we're talking about here. But
it's
but
not because the cost of hosting has gone up, just the price hasn't increased. Because
Right.
yeah,
So if you look at what's been happening in the economy for the last 4 years, everything has gone up.
except for
either
your podcast
10
host bill.
to 30%, and
Except
there's got to be a reason for that. What's the reason for that?
except why hasn't podcast hosting went up?
Mhm.
But believe it or not, it was a discussion. It was being no collusion.
Yeah, I would have imagined. Right.
And I always tell the people, I encourage you to go. You go, I will follow.
Yeah, you just don't want
Go
to be
first.
the first one.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't want to be the first.
No, I don't want to
one
be
is
the
what it comes
first.
down to. Right. Yeah. No,
at some point, someone's going to have to go. Have to. No choice.
Yeah.
Have to.
Right.
I cannot absorb because how we were able to do it before. You basically had this trade off. The bandwidth costs went lower, and
Right.
you were able to
Right.
have this spread. Well, now this is what's happening. You're at the bottom on bandwidth, and now the margin's coming down much, much tighter, and something has to give. Has to.
Yeah.
I can't say that we would be able to go. I'd hate to even predict, but at some point there's going to have to be a price increase. Has to be.
Well, Todd, if you back up and you look at the total market for the podcasting infrastructure, right, and looking at individual companies in the medium, there's always been a subset of hosting infrastructure companies for podcasting that have catered to kind of the higher end of the market, right? So you think about like an R19 or
They had a sales team.
a Megaphone,
Right,
or you
right,
think about these platforms that
Yeah.
have really catered to
Yeah. And they've
a
they were
top tier.
well, they
content.
had a bunch of acquisitions and they acquired sales teams and so they all have
Right.
some.
I mean, they
yeah.
built kind of sales organizations or around those organizations.
yeah.
They built in
Sure.
robust programmatic advertising. So the market's been shifting this way for many years towards catering to higher volume, larger podcasts, larger shows. of
But at
sorts.
the same time, some of those larger shows are now being asked to pay.
Well,
Oh, there's a few.
I don't know that is. I wouldn't make a generalization on that, Todd. I think it gets back to most of those bigger professional networks are doing revenue shares that is paying for the infrastructure. So
But that margin is
I
getting.
talked to all of them.
I know, but
I've
that
talked to
margin's
all
getting
of them.
tighter, and there are more. If you're not a super big show, you're paying these days. Oh
But
yeah.
that's a sliding scale, isn't it? I mean,
Well, I'm sure.
if
I'm
you're
sure.
a
I'm
big
sure.
show,
I'm sure the
that
top.
means that there's more revenue.
Well,
coming
I'm
in
sure
with
there's
it.
10% that don't have to pay, and 90% that do, that are on the monetization end.
Mm, From what I see, the pricing plans is that it's usually, let's say, $100, $150 a month just to be on their platform.
Yep.
And then at some point, that revenue share kicks in and makes the hosting free.
Yeah, sometimes.
Mm, That's their whole business model, Todd.
Sometimes. Again, we have people coming back to us that were promised the earth and the sky.
Well, if the show didn't reach scale,
Well, the show had
to
scale. They just didn't deliver
offset.
what was promised. So I see both sides of it. I see shows that go and
Right.
and they host for free and they have a revenue share. But again, that's 5, 6, 7% of the total ecosystem.
And a lot of what's happening, like with Spreaker, I see it with Art19, I see it with Megaphone. There's this spectrum of how they're going to market, trying to attract shows. And if you look at Spreaker, they have what's called the Spreaker Prime program, which basically gives access to hosting on their platform for free. All you have to do is sign up for the programmatic.
Right.
And then you go to Megaphone, they have a more elaborate kind of business plan that they have set up, but
And everybody's
oftentimes
different.
It's $50 or $100 a month base minimum, and then once you get in the door, then there's other opportunities to expand on the revenue that offsets the
Again,
cost.
for
Right.
for that slice of shows, which, that's good for them.
Yeah, but it's a big part of the market for podcasts, right? I mean, those are
Well,
the
it's a
shows that are
small
getting-
number of shows as compared to the whole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I'm not saying that everybody in the industry is taking advantage of these programs. There's still
No,
places.
they don't qualify
like-
for the programs.
Well, they could if they wanted to.
Uh,
All they have to pay is that $50 or $100 a month.
but again,
they can
if-
be on those platforms.
Yeah, but if you don't have the audience size to monetize, to offset the difference, you are not going to be on that plan. You're going to pay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I just
Yeah.
said. Is-
If you have a small
is that
show, you're going to pay.
you can go over there, but there are platforms that are free, like
So a
Spotify
person
for
that's getting
podcasts.
100 downloads can get a free account with advertising.
Programmatic advertising. Yeah, I can name a couple of them right now.
That I have
So-
100 people listening.
Well, Spotify for Creators is one. Spreaker
Oh,
is
of
one.
course, Spotify.
Right. So, see, that's what's going on. There's a spectrum of things that are going on in the space, and that it's not always in the same model, right? And it's not being done in the same way across the industry. And certain players in the industry are charging more for hosting, and other ones are not. And because the other ones that are not are catering to a different end of the market.
And yet none of those folks support video. Not a one of them.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a reason
I can tell
for it.
you, I can tell you though that all the ones that I've talked to are moving that direction.
Well, they're considering it. I know one
No,
show
they're
to
moving that direction.
well, I know one show that begged a certain big platform for video, and they agreed, and his bill went from almost nothing to a multi-$1,000s a month.
Well, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but you always have to consider the monetization piece, and that's going to put pressure on those hosting platforms to do dynamic insertion, programmatic advertising into video, and that's the piece that is yet to be built in the industry.
At the CPM rates that you're getting for programmatic.
Well, it's not going to be the same. Todd.
Okay,
It's-
but
it's-
again,
it's video
well,
programmatic,
again,
not audio.
yeah, I
programmatic.
know, and I know what YouTube is getting for CPM programmatics. We bought ads on YouTube, and I know
Right.
what it is. You can't make enough to offset the cost of the delivery.
I don't know.
YouTube can because they own all the fiber.
Yeah, YouTube doesn't pay that much. For
Yeah, they
that.
pay almost nothing. So of course they have a distinct advantage. But when you have a podcaster that wants to upload a 4K video and it is 4 to 5 gigabytes in size.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you are sub penny for your bandwidth delivery with just MP4, not HLS, and you multiply that, and then you multiply that again by 1,000, and you come up with that number, you're going to be kind of shocked of what that costs to deliver. And if you're getting a CPM that's not above, you're going to have to be above 12 or 13 consistently. And if you're not going to make no money on that audio because it's going to cost you more to deliver it than the ad will deliver, unless you put 5 ads in it.
Right. Thus, the inherent complexity in the medium today.
And if you want to,
at the root of what we're seeing happen.
And if you want to deliver HLS, then it is more expensive to deliver via HLS. So you got to have the math works out different. So I'm not saying that people can't do it, but there's going to be a lot of scratching heads and the margins are going to be much smaller. I will say this. I had at least 5 people come to me during the show and say, I want your programmatic business. I'm like, I have a partner already. What kind of a deal are you going to make me? And no one, at least verbally, the deal I was presented is better than the deal I have. I'm like, why? They're taking such a huge margin on programmatic, on audio programmatic. Some of these folks are taking 50%. 50%.
Right.
That's insane.
I think it ranges from like 40 to 50. Right.
Yeah, I won't do any deal unless the podcaster gets 70%. No way.
Well, you're not going to have much programmatic then.
Well, we do.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Our podcasters get 70% of the gross revenue.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Todd.
So why would
that's kind of rarer in the industry. Or it is you're probably the only one. might be the comment that would
because
be
in the
accurate.
end, guess who ends up making all the money? The delivery people make all the money.
Well, they built the infrastructure to capture the buys.
Yeah, it's all computerized.
It is, right? And I believe that's going to come to the video side too. So we'll see how that gets rolled out. I think if you talk to Justin from Transistor, I know that's the point he's positioning towards with the Podcast Standards Group, is trying to figure out a way to standardize the support of HLS.
Well,
and in the enclosure tag,
unless Apple does it, it won't work. My point, that's the key.
Did you get any sense from the Apple folks you talked to that they even acknowledge what's happening in the market compared to what they're doing on their own platform?
They didn't say anything, but here's my personal gut.
Okay.
And I would be willing to lose a bet on this. But my gut is that alternate enclosure thing would never be considered by them. But maybe. That's just and again, that's just Todd. That's my crystal ball. I have no idea.
Well, let's pull that apart. Why would they be against it?
I think it makes it much harder to deal with in the app.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, they could still separate it out into two separate categories of listing.
Well, it's already done.
I know it's already in there doing
RSS.
that, but it's
if
that's done by separate RSS.
Yeah,
feeds.
but if they say, let's say they say we're only going to support second RSS feed and you can send us HLS, well, great. But I would be shocked if they supported alternate enclosure. I just would. If they did, great. But the original purpose of the alternate enclosure was to serve multiple versions of a show. In other words, lower quality audio for, Africa
Yeah, but
and
I think
places.
we're
Yeah, no
past
one's
that.
doing that.
No, I think we're past that. So I think that the use of alternative enclosure is to offer a video version and then the main enclosure tag to offer the audio version.
Yeah. If they did it,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic. But
Yeah, and
again,
it doesn't have to be HLS. It can just be a link to the MP4.
well, then why? And then again, they could very well within their infrastructure pull that MP4, re-encode it
Right.
to HLS, serve it. The alternate enclosure just be the.
right.
There's all kinds of ways to mix it up.
Well, and that's kind of the bigger point here is that there's lots of pathways that Apple could do this.
And
All they have to do is make the tweaks to their back end, really, at the end of the day, because they used to have the infrastructure where you could pull up all of the video versions
and it also
and separately all the audio versions. So all they have to do is separate that in the back
and
end.
the other reason that they might do alternate enclosure
Right.
is if they're going to control the user experience and want to make sure there's a good experience, they'll do like Spotify has done. And within the app, they'll infrastructure it on the back end on their side to support the HLS. So they'll just take the MP4, convert it. And if I was going to do, that's probably if I had the say so at Apple, that's what I would probably recommend. Now people are screaming because they're saying, well, that's not pass through.
Well, it's not. So
Maybe they're
it's going to break any kind of dynamically inserted hostery capabilities on the video
and being
side.
that no podcast content host has that support now. Nobody has that. So unless it gets built.
Yeah.
But it is the first time, though. It's kind of funny. The first time of any show, I've actually heard other podcast hosts now considering to do video. Everyone a year ago was, no way, we're not doing it. Don't talk to us. This is not in our roadmap. We're not doing it.
Well, that was a couple of hosts that was saying that.
Oh, that
I
was,
don't know that
yes.
all of them were saying
Well,
that.
there's the ones that I was exposed to. There are events.
Right. Well, there was what they said offline and what they said in private.
Well, what they
were
say in private was the
different.
same thing a
Oh,
year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Absolutely. We're not doing it. I had those private conversations. And we have no desire to do video. Again and again and
with
again.
a couple of them, but I wouldn't say that all of them had that approach. They may have had that publicly, but they didn't necessarily have it privately.
No,
They could see where the winds were blowing.
well, of
here,
course.
Todd.
Then how
So-
it's simple to implement video. How come they're not supporting it now? It's simple. Turn it on. It's simple. Turn it on. It's
Yeah.
not any more complicated than hosting audio.
I agree with you.
It's 15 minutes.
I know.
You might need a video player for your customers. So that's, a week of dev time.
Well, you already built all that stuff. So
Yeah,
you
but
already have
I'm
all
just
that.
saying, but that what we use with WordPress is the default video player that comes with WordPress. What we provided for our podcast hosting customers that are on, it's not complicated.
No, it's not. I would imagine that player that you have works with HLS too.
Don't know about that. I'd have to look.
You don't know about that?
Yeah. HLS is
Probably.
mostly employed on apps and, the YouTube website. You have to have the playback infrastructure. Again, you got to have the serving infrastructure to be able to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
When someone plays this show on the website, they don't know it's HLS. They don't. They just play it back and it's
Well,
It's
especially
video.
in live shows like what we're doing right now.
or someone
is-
comes and downloads the show, which, 20% of the audience does. So
Yeah, and what are we going to do with live? Because
Oh.
live can really only be done through.
well, live is already being done on HLS. We were doing live
I know.
HLS with
That's
this
what
show
we're doing
for a
right
while.
now with this show.
Well, no, with this show we're doing we're
But
doing
we're pushing to other
we're doing
platforms.
we're doing RTMP, and we're not doing any HLS on this right now.
Okay, so you're using RTMP to push to the
that
social
goes
platforms.
that goes to everybody. Goes to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Everyone's doing
And then
RTMP.
They're using HLS to push it out.
I don't know how they convert it. So,
Okay.
or if they do. RTMP is its own thing. I see
Yeah.
the bandwidth that it is used on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else.
Yeah, it's a streaming.
I think they serve the.
HTTP
I think they serve the
protocol.
original
It's
content.
a streaming HTTP.
There is a, you know, there is
HTTP
a. We already have a solution for live. That's the thing.
Yeah.
We've got the ability for apps to show the live. Now I stopped doing HLS because it was so expensive.
Uh,
You know, that because you
Yeah.
get 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 50 people on the HLS stream.
yeah.
It could be $100 every live stream or more.
Hmm.
The way to serve this show, one person on HLS, one person is about $1 to serve this show for 90 minutes. One person to restream and go out HLS on an app, one person is about $1 for that delivery.
Hmm.
That's using Cloudflare. So you can go look at their prices.
That seems to be gouging.
Restream, no, it's expensive. Restream doesn't even support HLS.
Yeah, but
'Cause
what
it's too
makes it
expensive.
expensive?
The delivery platform and the conversion and the computers, and again, that's part of it.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
this works on most platforms that take RTMP. And I'm not a techie, so it's going to Twitter, and there's a reason that none of those platforms take HLS. YouTube doesn't take HLS. YouTube takes RTMP. Facebook takes RTMP. Twitter takes RTMP. They all take RTMP.
So why don't we all just use RTMP then?
I think because it's more alive than on demand.
Could it be on demand?
I don't think so. RTMP. What is the actual? I think it's real time media protocol.
Yeah, I think it's built on the HTTP stack, isn't it?
It's real time messaging protocol designed for transmitting audio, video, and other data over the internet, particularly for live streaming. It's broke down into small packets.
That sounds like the definition for HLS.
So HLS definition. Let's do that. HTTP live streaming is a video streaming protocol developed by Apple.
HTTP, right.
And it's the same. It's just a different protocol.
Yeah, it's probably doing the same technical process, right?
And it supports adaptive bit rate, which I don't think RTMP
Adaptive.
does.
Oh,
But-
well, like actually, I think it's variable bit rate, right? So
Well, it's adaptive. Is what it's a definition says. It's adaptive bit rate. It supports multiple versions of video stream at different bit rates and resolution, allowing the client to choose the best quality for their network. Most time, they pick the stream you should get based upon your bandwidth. That's the main difference. That's why.
the variable bit rate or VBR has been around with audio for years.
Yeah, but no one does VBR in podcasts. Everyone does fixed bit rate in audio, and because the
right.
files
Unless you're
are small.
doing live streaming, right?
I don't know, maybe, but adaptive bit rate is what makes HLS so powerful.
Yeah, years and years ago, I did that with my own radio show. I did an adaptive or a VBR version of my MP3 file. So I would play it through the Shoutcast server. So if a listener had a higher bit rate consumption capability, they could listen to a better quality version of the show.
Yeah. So again, all these other folks, So again, I think because HLS is not used a lot in live streaming, and people are not serving media to most apps, like again, most of the podcast apps that were supporting video live would only take HLS. And because it's natively supported in the app, it's easy for the developers, to my understanding. Whereas the RTMP video is not easy for the apps. So that's the reason why all the apps required for HLS for the live stream. And that's what just was so ridiculously expensive. HLS delivery cost difference.
So, Todd, one thing we haven't really talked about is kind of the podcast show event itself,
Yeah.
and how many people were there. What was the vibe beyond just the video stuff? But what was kind of the culture you saw there? Did you see a lot
It
of
was
Americans there?
no,
Did you?
no, hardly any Americans. There was a handful that we talked to, and it was all industry people. 6,000. I would say that's probably, you always try, the show produces a number 6,200, and then you look at the number. I have some pictures I put on social that there was at least 1,000 people just in 3 shots that I shot. And again, that wasn't counting any of the rooms.
Well,
So it was, there are a lot of people there. But
Well,
again, that show does not, we didn't see 6,000 people's worth of traffic at the booth. I can tell you that.
well, I think you have to back up and you have to look at what number you just shared and where that's derived from. Because if you compare that to like podcast movements,
Oh, there's
it's
nothing.
not the same.
Oh, it is a massive show.
Well,
Massive.
no, I'm not saying.
Oh.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about kind of the infrastructure of what they actually do at the event is different, right? So
Yeah.
it's 2 days,
Yeah.
and people can come in and buy
A single day
one-day
pass.
ticket,
Yep.
right? So you have a certain percentage of the people that go day one
Yep.
and day two, and then there's another
Yep.
group of people that just do one
Yep.
or second day.
Yeah. Most of the people
So
we talk to
to-
are coming for a day.
Yeah. So what we don't know is how many people attended the whole event.
I would
Which
say-
was it 2,000 people out of the 6, or was it 3,000 people out of the 6?
Probably half.
Okay, so 3,000 people knew each day.
No, I would
Is that
say 6,000 was the total.
Total, but
I would say that there
you're
was at least
maybe-
1,000 people that were there both days, and then 2,000 that were in and outs.
Yeah, so you have to factor in how many people attended both days,
I would
you're
say
counting
I'd
them
say about
twice.
1,000.
right? Because I think the event counts people that attend
Yeah,
both days
I'm sure
twice.
yeah, of course. So again, that would be 2,000 for 2 days, and then 4,000 that were, came for single
that
day.
went both days, or yeah, so
Two
it's like-
2,000 that came for both days, and 4,000 that came for one day each, or 2,000 each. Yeah.
Yeah, so people that are comparing podcast movement with the podcast show may be comparing apples and oranges. is
But
what I'm
again, it
trying
was
to say.
it's because people come in, have meetings, go to some
Yeah.
events,
And then they go home,
they go home.
right?
People were coming in from France just for the day. People were
Plus-
getting
oh,
in
go-
late.
Go ahead.
But anyway, it was, and central location, you're 10 minutes from the tube,
Yep.
It was, and no one except for exhibitors are at the hotels. No one, no attendees stayed at, no one came
Means
in.
A lot of people came from the local UK
Yeah.
region.
Yeah. So I'm sure the people that came 2 days in a row probably were mostly local. Although we had some people from Germany, France, Spain, Italy,
Hmm.
Ireland, a lot of people from Ireland, Scots,
interesting.
what else? Yeah, a lot of people from Italy.
Yeah.
Those were the countries I heard mostly.
Okay.
Yeah. And what else?
Well,
I
there's
had some
also-
Swiss, a few Dutch. Yeah, so there was a good variety. Yes.
Yeah, I think I also saw that there was 6 after-hours live podcasts on stage in the venue. So like outside the normal.
Yeah, I don't know how
Show
many people
hours.
attended those.
Well, I don't either, but I'm just saying that.
The evening events were only us that were exhibitors. There was hardly any, like we went to go to the iHeart party, and it was just, everyone was an exhibitor because people went home. So
Right.
there's a few, but there was not networking. There's no networking opportunities after the show, besides people within the industry.
Yeah, I went to the first year of the podcast show, so I spent a whole week in London
Yeah.
around that particular event, and when they had the event the first year, they had all those live performances of podcasts in theaters around London.
Mm.
So
I think they had that
looks like,
some of that going on too.
well, from what I saw on the website, only one of the 5 live shows that they did on the day before and the day after were actually outside of the venue.
Oh, I see. They had a whole bunch of mini studios there.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't pay attention too much. The only session I could go to was the Apple session, and it was full. There was 600 people in that room with people sitting on the floor.
Yeah, and I think they also counted how many people that they counted attended the live tapings of sorts of podcasts
Well,
in their overall attendance
what
number.
we didn't talk to was new creators. Everyone was a existing creator. We didn't talk to a single person that was pre-launch. Not a single show. Not a single person. The entire
So does
time.
that make the show not a success for you?
What's going to make the show a success for us is our
Is the
network offering.
networks?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah. That will
That's-
be. And also getting our word out because people still don't know who we are.
that's what I see in the market today. There's a lot of activity around networks right now.
Oh yeah, it's huge. Yeah, they're all fighting for the same talent.
Right. Well, that's been going on for a while.
Yeah, it's
Right.
even more now. But we probably talked to 30 or 40 networks. Probably that's
What was the perception that you had around what they were all looking for?
what we offer.
No. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, what their challenge is
what
all their
things
shows.
are they trying to solve by aligning with a particular host?
They're trying to make sure that they don't have to have 18 different interfaces. And they have a single point of stats. And our stats, man, people were crazy about it. We had a picture on the wall, and just that picture alone drove 50% of the traffic in the booth wanting to see our stats. The majority, I think that there's, well, anyway, I won't, yeah. I think some hosts do a pretty shitty job on stats. Spotify for sure. Their stats are junk.
Spotify doesn't really care that much.
They don't care. No. And people
The higher
can't.
the number, the better.
And
right?
people can't believe the numbers. Yeah, that was industry talk on the floor. But
well, that whole,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of people probably, I'm sure, we're talking about the display of plays.
the
right?
BBC had a booth that was kitty corner to us, and there was nobody. There's like 2 people in the booth, and not a lot of activity going on. It's kind of weird. So I had this big, expensive booth. There was some big booths there that I was trying to figure out what their business even was. Wasn't as many vendors.
What boosts did you say, from what you could tell, were getting the most interest?
Nobody got much traffic. We probably walked out with 200 contacts.
So would you go back?
Yeah, we're gonna go back. I'm not gonna have as
So
big.
how's that?
I'm not gonna have as big a booth.
So how's that different than what you went through with Podcast Movement?
Which event?
Either one.
I'm almost embarrassed to say how bad Podcast Movement Evolutions was.
Bad. There just weren't anybody there,
Bad,
or was it-
bad. And the people we talked to more people that we know and are friends with and then have been in the business. We talked to the industry there. We didn't talk to
Yeah.
creators.
Well, that's what that event is.
It's bad.
It's not. It's not a creator.
And there was, Frank, I mean, Dan should have been over there and seen that show. Here's a problem. Centrally located, easy to get to, lots of food options. Oops.
Yeah.
Oops. Oh, what's going on here? I pulled the cable.
Oh no.
We're not out in the middle of the boondocks. Dallas and Gaylord is, we're out in the middle of nowhere. We're not in a central location. I can't walk out of the Gaylord and go to a restaurant,
Well, it's such a huge venue too.
and it's, and that is much, because if someone's coming, like in London, we could get out in the evenings if we wanted to go to sightseeing, we could. You could have walked out, bam, been on the tube or been in a bus, in 10 minutes, we could have been at a major attraction. Westminster Abbey, 10 minutes away from that venue area. All kinds of stuff. So I don't know. Everyone is going to see the word on the street, Dan, is everyone's going to see how the summer event goes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's
the acid test this year.
That's the acid test.
Yep. Yeah.
And right now, I'm only planning 2 events for next year, podcast events.
That's a big change, Todd.
And one of them is London.
And that one didn't even sound like it was
It's good because
a great creator event either.
we'll know in a month what our numbers are from that event. But there's so many creators there, you have to be there. There's 6,000 people. I mean, wall to wall.
Well, there were creators there or there weren't creators there?
Yeah, there's
I've heard
plenty
you
of
say-
creators there, but not pre-launch.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, it just
Shows that are maybe part of
Gobs.
another network.
Yeah,
or-
gobs or have their own individual shows. We talk to a lot of people that are just a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. A lot of them.
So why don't you think that that same pattern isn't happening with Podcast Movement here?
No day pass, middle of nowhere,
Right.
middle of the week. But the middle of the week there, they could come for a day.
Right.
Boom. It's just geography. It's different. Texas is the size of all of Europe. So you can get an airplane and be in London in an hour from any place in Europe. So it's just
Right.
it's just a different geographical thing.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so what does Podcast Movement need to do to change is the question. Is it need to scale
Venue and
back
location.
just venue? Well, because they have to accept the fact that they're not a 3,000 person show
No.
anymore.
No.
So
No.
they can't justify being in a huge hotel
No.
anymore.
No.
They could probably be in a theater venue and be better
They
off.
could probably be in downtown LA and be okay. It'd be better than Texas and the Gaylord.
I mean, if they're
that
going
you need a rental car to get to. Oh, they're gonna.
Right. If they're going to cater to the industry is pretty small,
Yeah.
actually. And it's
So-
been getting smaller over the last
So-
year
so-
because everybody's getting laid off.
But Dallas is a major hub. But Dallas, and then from where the airport is to where the venue is a long
it's quite-
ways.
It's quite a drive. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but not to say that Heathrow to this venue is not a long ways either. But again, I'm coming from international. I'm going into Heathrow and I'm taking an hour to get to the venue. But once I'm at the venue, there's 50 food options,
Yeah.
5
All-
minutes within
right
the
around,
venue. Yeah.
Right around that venue. It's all walking distance.
You can go have an
hubs
offsite meeting
and-
and
Right.
go offsite and be back in an hour.
I know. Yeah. I did that quite often when I was there.
Yeah.
These pubs that are underground and
Yeah, there's
I-
just
it's kind
lots of options,
right.
And
So
I and also again, I think if Podcast Movement wants to survive, they got to shift. If they want creators to come, if it's going to be an industry event, it's an industry event. That's all we need to know.
I don't even know why a creator would even go, Todd. At this point, why would a creator even go?
Good
It's a good question. right?
question.
That Podcast Movement needs to answer. I don't know that there is a reason for them to go.
Podfest.
I mean, increasingly, if you see the surveys that are coming out of the trade show industry right now, You know, panel and content is at the bottom of the list of
Oh,
reasons that people attend conferences.
these panels were full. I think that's the reason a lot of people went. The panels were jam packed.
What was different about those compared to what we see at Podcast
I,
Movement, where there's very few people that go to the panels?
I think there's very few people that go to the panels because there's very few people there.
Well, well, that's a given, right?
Well, I think what's happening at a lot of people are going to have meetings with big industry people, so they go to the meetings and do their business and leave.
Or is it just because it's still new in London? What's happening
Maybe.
with this medium,
Maybe,
and what's happening here in the U.S. is
maybe,
mature.
maybe. But
And,
there's a
and
lot of people
eventually
speaking two or
that'll-
three times. Like James spoke 2 or 3 times. I didn't even apply to speak. I could have probably gotten a spot, but I didn't want to leave. There's only 2 of us there, and we didn't want to leave Dave hanging for too long by himself. So
Yeah, right.
it's a different show. There's a huge amount of energy. But one thing is true from last year to this year: everyone's got a place to go. You got to have a reason to have them stop at the booth. You got to have good signage. You got to have, and if I next year my booth is going to be more simple. Start your podcast here, or migrate to us. That'll be the sign.
So the reason that most people you think went to that show was because of the panel sessions.
Oh, they weren't talking to the if okay, so there was less than
Or was it just to meet other people?
I don't know, maybe. There again, I'm not intermixing. I'm sitting in a booth, right? So there was 20, we'll have to count, we can count it on 25 vendors maybe. And if Podcast Movement had 6,000 people, I would not be able, I wouldn't be able to talk at the end of the day because I would be 5 deep.
Well, there's been times at Podcast Movement when that's been the case.
Right. I would
That's
be
been
I'd be 5 deep.
4 years ago. 5
There,
years
I
ago.
was never 5 deep. It was 2 1 2 2 1 2. Both of us busy. We had steady traffic the entire time, but it wasn't like I had people. Once in a while I had a person waiting. And to me, a good sign of a good trade show for the vendors is when we are 5 deep, and people are listening into the other conversations, and then they're cycling through.
Right.
Well,
I think one of the things, Todd, if you think back 4 or 5 years ago, one of the things that really made that happen was the fact that there was energy around being a new creator, right?
yeah, that's true. But one
People
thing,
were excited about podcasting. People are wanting to get involved in it. It was the hot thing at the time.
yeah.
And let's call a spade a spade. Podcasting is mature now.
So
It's
the
a hot thing.
So how Podfest drives people to the floor to talk to the vendors is they're smart. Have beer each evening, and they
Have a networking event, right?
in the middle of the hall, and no sessions going on, and they have a treasure map. So again, what is the quality of those? Because we try to pitch as many as we can when they come to the treasure map. If they're already hosting with someone else, we send them away with, why are you going to migrate to us? Does that generate any business? Probably very little.
Yeah.
But it gives us at least exposure. Oh, you guys are Blueberry. Here's what you have. Wow, that's cool. But I will say this, the traffic that came to the booth, it was like, wow, 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 wow. I got this. That was the word. Wow was the word. You got all this? You guys been in business 20 years? Wow, wow.
Right.
All under one roof? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the reaction.
Well, Todd, I think you're in your platform are reflective of a company that has spanned the entire span of podcasts journey, right? So you're one of 3 platforms that supports video still today in RSS. There's only 2 other companies that support it. And so you've been able to see the full span of time on this. And I think that puts you in a kind of a unique position in the market. I don't necessarily see Podbean or to some degree, even Lipson, but I would say Lipson to more degree, really playing that position.
Supposedly Libsyn was there. I never seen anybody. Of course, I don't know if I'd recognize any of their people now.
I would say that they were all the people that represented the advertised
Probably
cast
the advertised cast. Yeah.
side. I mean, it's not called advertised cast anymore.
Yeah, whatever. It's
A lot of that team left. So it's really just a couple of guys now.
I
that
saw some
came.
of the ex Podbean
Yeah,
employees, and there's no bitterness there at all.
right.
But no one had anything.
I'm
to
not
s-
going to comment too
but
much
no,
on that
but
one.
no
Todd,
one
but
had anything to say, which I thought was interesting. So I thought, oh, when people
well,
have
they all want to be positive. Todd.
when no
Come
one
on.
has, well, they were positive. They had
I
nothing
know
to say.
privately they weren't positive, but I'm talking about publicly.
But
right.
to me, makes me say, oh, they got severance and some NDA as part of their. Then why are they being so quiet? That's a
Well,
question.
Todd, it's a very challenging job market right now, and all those
Oh,
people want
yeah.
to find new roles.
That's probably true. So they don't want to be caught squealing about their old employer. So
That old employer made some pretty big changes very quickly. So
and we're getting some of their big customers because of it.
yeah, there's been a lot of people that have left.
Well, I'm saying we're getting some of their big corporate clients
I know.
because
I
of it.
know.
Yeah, not their
Right.
people.
Well, no. I'm not talking about staff. I'm talking about
Business.
clients, customers.
Yeah.
Right. Right. No,
Yeah.
I can totally see that happening.
Yeah. Especially when people's contracts are up.
Yep.
Because some people are under contracts.
Yeah, I think it's challenging market right now.
So we'll see.
I
So
don't know
Rob,
what's happening with Lipson right now either.
Yeah.
It's probably a pretty challenging situation for them too.
yeah. So anyway, is getting to another topic at hand. Is this the end? Or are we going to continue the new media show?
I don't know, Todd. Maybe we should talk about that. Is there a reason to continue this show?
I think so.
What would your definition of that be?
I just have to be frank. I have to protect the audio audience. I have to continue to be that bearer of truth that audio is still valuable. And push back a little bit on not your narrative, but some of this corporate narrative that's
I
going
have a
out there.
narrative, Todd. I have
Yeah,
a
you
narrative?
do to a little bit. You fell in love with YouTube, so
No, I got into it to learn what was happening over
Well,
there.
okay, but
So,
I
I'm
understand.
not infatuated with YouTube. I'm just seeing what's happening there and what the impact is
Yeah,
of what they're doing is significant, and we should be paying attention to it.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's a good question. Is the medium that we're working in new media anymore too, Todd?
Well, it's not like it can change the show to the media show. I don't think that domain is available.
I do know that the White House has now apportioned a seat in the press room called the new media seat.
Oh, that's great. I could buy my
I
domain.
saw that, which I thought was an interesting connection to us because it's usually a podcaster
Yeah.
of some sort or a
They
video creator.
definitely pissed off the mainstream media with that seat too. But well
Boy.
in time.
I really feel sorry for the mainstream media right now, Todd. I don't know about you.
But I saw your post on LinkedIn and other places talking about maybe pursuing some more AI type topics and
Yeah. hmm Yeah, I'm looking to the future, Todd. I'm looking to what's on the horizon here and adjusting, and which I've always kind of
yeah.
dodged and moved and tried to keep up with what's happening in the market. If I think back when I started my radio show back in 1999, I did it because of a big shift in media. I could see what was happening with content marketing and online contributions for that, and I wanted to get involved in it, and I wanted to learn it, and I wanted to participate in it, and I wanted to take advantage of it. I have a marketing background, I have a marketing degree, and that was a big part of what I could see the shifts in the market. And so I'm seeing the same thing happen right now with AI. And
Surprisingly, that conversation didn't come up at one time at the booth, which is curious.
it is curious, Todd.
Not
Good
once. Now they asked
Why is
about
that?
they took our flyer.
Why do you think that happened? That probably should have been a more important conversation than video.
I think it's just become part of everybody's their lives. They're using it. So when they see someone has an AI integrated solution, they're like, "Oh, okay." If you don't
They're not-
have it, then maybe that's a red flag. But
They're not concerned about the direction that it's going or
no.
issues related
Oh, they're
to
concerned.
using
I'm
it.
sure they're concerned about their jobs. But they weren't there to talk about their jobs. They're there to talk about building their shows. So
I think it's the same thing. But
yeah.
yeah.
But I think the I didn't hear any discussions about AI taking over content or anything like that. A few people asked, about, can you, who do you recommend for doing multi-language? And of course, there's just a couple players that are doing that well right now. So,
Yeah, I just wonder if that market for podcasting is still not seeing its impact yet, I guess.
well, I think that I don't see it as an impact to original content. Personally, maybe you're listening to it. I'm avoiding any AI generated videos when I can detect it
Why are you avoiding it, Todd?
because I don't trust it yet.
Is there a point when you will trust
We'll
it?
see.
Or-
I don't know. But
or is
again,
that not
I'm going to be
even
seeking
on the
out
cards?
original voices and people that like to argue. Me, who knows? I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah,
there's lots of cool things you can experiment with. A lot of people are experimenting with having their co-host being an AI, but a lot of, you can't do that live because there's too much of a delay. So, there's just, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's not going to hold it back for long.
Again,
You
everyone's
can
going to,
always edit out the delay.
everyone's
You-
going, you can edit out.
post-production.
You can edit out for sure. But I think, I don't know. It wasn't a conversation there. That's for sure.
I think that's more interesting than anything. So this whole conversation between audio and video, I
Yeah.
think, is kind of not a sign of
Well,
the industry really embracing the reality of the consumer market. So
but again, most people have time to listen and have time to watch. Some people like one over the other, and it's always been that way. Some people like to read more than they like to
Yeah.
listen. So there's
in a
no,
lot of ways, that's why this conversation is kind of, or this tug of war between audio and video is kind of a silly one because, audio and video have been part of podcasting since 2005. So it just wasn't emphasized for many years.
yeah, and it was expensive in the early days.
Well, and I think that was a big reason why video podcasting kind of
Went to
shifted
YouTube.
back in.
I went to
back-
YouTube in
yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah, everybody shifted their content
Yeah.
to YouTube because then they didn't have to pay
Yeah,
for the
didn't have to
bandwidth.
pay for nothing. Yep.
Right. But the bandwidth back in those days was a lot more expensive than it is today.
Yeah, we started out paying 10 cents a gig.
And now it's fractions of a cent. So
yeah, sub penny. Yeah.
yeah. So things have changed. But the medium hasn't really changed from the standpoint of the infrastructure of podcasting. We're still doing the same thing that we did 15 years ago.
And it's beautiful. It's open.
It's beautiful. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. It's open and
It is.
can't be controlled.
Well, not that people aren't going to try, but I
Well.
agree with you, Todd. I don't think it's going to be successful. And that's why I don't think that YouTube is going to be able to disrupt podcasting.
Oh, they're disrupting it already. They're disrupting.
Well, they're trying.
They're disrupting the message.
They're trying, and to some degree, they're succeeding.
Oh,
but
yeah.
we've seen this happen before.
Oh, true. And then they gave up
So-
on stuff before. I don't think they're going to get.
YouTube's
I don't
gonna
think.
give up. No,
I don't think they're going to give up this time.
no.
There's too much money to be made for them, and to monetize on the backs of creators that don't get enough views to get their get their 10 cents.
I'm fascinated to think about how AI is going to change the paradigm of YouTube.
It could saturate it to the point that hero humans don't make no money and YouTube takes it all.
There's a lot of talk in the tech space right now that AI is going to take over our devices and how we interface with the internet.
Well, it's what
and
you
it's
allow.
Well, it's what the big tech companies
Oh,
build
yeah.
and make available to us.
Yeah, you look at
And
the
it's going to
Google.
be a AI interface.
You look at the Google announcement last week. It's everything's integrated, so that
It's all going to be funneled through AI.
which
It's gonna be-
may ultimately completely destroy small businesses, completely destroy creators. It has serious ramifications.
Yeah.
Because
Well-
if YouTube doesn't have to rely on creators to make content, they can just use robots.
Well, the same thing happened with the internet in the early days, Todd. We transitioned from an analog economy to a digital economy, and that caused change.
Well, at
And I
least
think we're
things
in the
was
middle of another
Oh, we're-
kind of technological transformation.
yeah. Okay, I just want to look at this. Just got my
Yeah.
numbers. Just got my numbers for GoDaddy.
You did? Well, good news.
Good news.
Yeah. So to get back to your question
Yeah.
about the future of the show, I would
Sure.
love to hear from the audience
Oh,
to let us know what you think we should do. Are we serving a purpose in the market? Do you see us, I want to do a show that is growing and is relevant to the audience and is driving value to the audience. And I think you want that too, Todd.
well, I also want to protect the medium, and if we're not
Yeah,
serving
but
as
that's
if we're
going
not,
into it with an agenda, which is what I'm worried about.
Well,
I'm not sure that I want to go into it with an agenda
Well,
to drive a certain narrative.
I have to protect the medium. If I don't, I'm going to get fired.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to be here.
Well, I'm a purveyor of take my RSS out of my dead bare hands.
Okay, well, I'm not against that. That's fine. So
We've been talking about AI and stuff, but my issue is I just don't want to be so hung up on video.
at the same time, the whole world is.
Well, not the whole world, a percentage of the world, a big
It's a pretty-
percentage.
It's a growing percentage of the
Yeah,
world.
but again, if we want, and I'm saying this very seriously. You thought I'm lying. If
No, I don't
we
think you're lying.
if we want the podcasting space to survive as
The audio podcasting space.
the audio
It's
podcasting
clear.
space to survive, we have to make sure that we are inclusive and open to people that are not being under pressure to think they have to do video. And what is podcasting served? Under marginalized groups. It served women. It served people in countries that can't show their face. All kinds of potential because it's audio. And I think there's still a huge market for it. But if we continue to just talk about video, and if that is what's coming out of the industry's mouth, and that's what they want to shift to, they'll never beat YouTube. Never. They'll never beat
What do you mean?
YouTube.
They'll never beat YouTube. So somebody has to beat YouTube.
No, I'm just saying it'll all go to YouTube. If that's all they want to talk about, it's just all going to go to YouTube. And if that's what people want, that's fine. And then you have to answer to that piper. You have to answer to YouTube. And if you say one thing wrong, you're out. And then you have to go find a new home and a way to make money and find a way to build your brand. There is so much risk. And from a creator standpoint of being a one-trick pony. And as long as we keep telling people that there is not just a one-trick pony, you can do stuff all across the space, including YouTube if you want. I'm cool with that. But I think we have to, again, I feel it's my mission. I used to tell people you have to have your own .com. I still say that, but I tell people now, hey, you better have an RSS feed as a backup plan, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well,
so, I'm happy to talk about AI and all that stuff. I am. It's going to be huge. I already know it. We're using it all the way through my company. We're definitely going to be an AI first company. That's for sure.
I don't
Otherwise,
think audio is going to go away at all. It's not really entirely under threat per se. I think it's under threat to some that are looking at the audio podcast industry growing as fast as it has.
It's not growing as fast as it did. That ain't happening. What is
as far as new creators?
What is under threat is new creators.
Right.
And if there's not a pipeline of new creators, the companies won't survive. The reason
I think the bigger question to answer is, how do we foster new creators in audio podcasting?
Just make them understand the value of it. But we also have to do what the Podcasting 2.0 is doing, what the Standards Project is doing. We need to get these effing features. And what we also have to do is understand that without micro networks, with people circling the wagons with 20 shows that are it's going to be a hard road to hoe. So, I fully understand. I can't wait for the apps no more. So stuff we're doing internally, we're not waiting for the apps. We can't. I can't wait for the apps. Because we have to give the list. Here's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Why are people on YouTube? Why are people on Spotify? It's easy.
I agree.
We got these old apps. There's no interaction. There's no way to give, at least, in some of the more overcast than those others. There's no way to build community. There's none of that in there.
Well, it's all being built outside of podcasting. It's all being built on other platforms that are building these capabilities. So people have to plug and play into a bunch of different tools and platforms.
Right. And most people are not technically inclined to do that. So, we're going to have to come up with solutions, and other people, I'm not the only one thinking about this.
Well, I think to attract new creators, I think the industry needs to integrate more of these things into one tool, but just like what YouTube is doing. I mean, if you want to compete with YouTube, you got to compete with YouTube. It's the same message that I have for Spotify, because Spotify is not competing with YouTube right now, even though they say they want to be just like YouTube.
But again, are we going to be able to coalesce around one tool and they're going to become the YouTube of podcasting? No one's going to do that.
And what if Netflix gets into podcasting in a big way? I saw that they were a sponsor at the podcast show.
I don't know what they were doing. Didn't see any of their people or booth. They didn't have a booth.
They probably didn't have a booth, but they've had podcast staff. Actually, a person that worked there used to work for Apple.
I will see
on the podcasting side.
We'll see what happens. I think in the end, it's going to be a big shakeout. But, what we have to do as podcast hosts. Now, it's kind of interesting. Fountain made a deal with RSS Blue, and they're combining. So, that I won't go into
what's RSS Blue?
That's another hosting platform, a small one. It was Podcasting 2.0, 100% platforms. They served a lot of music shows. So
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
wasn't familiar with them.
but
So,
they went from a price structure that was very low to very high, so there's disruption there. I won't go into it, but they've got a tough challenge now to figure that out, how to keep their creators happy. But again, that is probably smart move by them to join up and have forces. But as a podcast host, they're not technically competing against me, so how can I promote that app? So it's a double-edged sword, right? If I go over there and tell my listeners to go over there and listen, and I'm trying to also, and I've converted a lot of my listeners to podcasters, they're go over there and then, they're being marketed to. Not saying that that's happening yet, but again, it's kind of funny. So, but again, I think it's up to the creators. Again, I'm going to try to build tools that allow make it easier for small networks to have a bigger presence. And initially, it's going to be strictly PWA. It's not the best solution, but I don't have 500,000 laying around to build an app either.
right.
And I don't want to build an app. I really don't. But now there's a little bit of a game change. Apple has been forced. This is kind of funny.
Oh, on their 30% share?
Well, they've been
stuff?
forced to allow external links. So now if I'm a podcast app, put the funding tag in there. Put the funding tag link to my funding stuff so I can, if someone's using your app and they want to send me a donation via PayPal or whatever mechanism I'm using, let that happen. But again, will they do it? I don't. And I jokingly said to Apple, they're like, what would you like to see us implement? And of course, I've got a laundry list of stuff, and I was kind of jokingly say, I said, now you guys really want to make a statement. And of course, there's Stonewall, not a smile, not a grin, not a single thing. And I jokingly said, I said, you want to make a statement. If the lawsuit your appeal fails, and I said, put the funding link in the Apple Podcast app, linking to, and not a smile, and of course, Apple does not like this, Apple corporate does not like this ruling, but it has major implications. Major.
So, Todd, I have a question for Apple that I'm going to post on here because I know that sometimes Apple listens.
Yeah.
So with Jake Shapiro up on stage at the podcast show, does that mean that Jake or Ted or any of the others that are at Apple can join us on the New Media Show at some point?
There's not a chance in hell.
Because we'll ask too many
No, it's because
tough questions.
I'm just assuming they've been 20 years since they've been able to present.
I know.
Okay.
That's kind of my point.
So you had two of the top dogs for Apple Podcast on the stage.
So it was Jake and who else?
What's her name? I apologize.
Oh, okay.
She's
I know who you're talking about.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
All right, I'll be scolded here by somebody. I'll get an email. Anyway.
She's the lead program manager for Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Right.
And the presentation was very Apple-esque and very practiced. They do what Apple does. And I kind of teased somebody that was on the team. I said, how long did that take to get through legal?
That's what I say, buttoned up.
And not a word.
Right.
I said, take 3 months, 4 months. How many months did it take to get that through legal? And not a single comment. So there's no way that we could ever get. Maybe if they had an announcement and we had an agenda, but again, they have the Apple way. They send an email, they invite people for private meetings. You're under non-disclosure,
No public spontaneous discussions.
No, because they get fired.
They get fired.
Yeah, they can't. They really can't. And, I feel bad because we all abuse them. we don't abuse them, but 30 minutes, how's things going? And I go for 30 minutes and they can't really say, that sounds great. I call it contractor speak. When I worked for the government, I'd go in and the contractor would be telling me, wow, da, 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 da. And if I said, that sounds great, that was an acknowledgement that I think we should do this. I said, interesting. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, Apple has every right to do what they're doing.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I think it's unfortunately a little disengaged from the reality of
it is the reason.
world
The reason
right now.
is because, but do you see really YouTube out there doing their messaging's pretty tight too. So it's not
Yeah,
much.
but they're up on stage doing interviews.
Yeah.
And I do see their staff going on podcasts.
So again, I think it's just that's the culture there, and I understand.
Oh, I know it
and-
is. It's been that way since we started
since the beginning.
acknowledging their.
That's why I had to make sure I got in and heard the presentation. And I was
It's so rare.
I filmed a couple of the things, and they showed our and we have to give credit where credit's due. Regardless of what people think, this industry would not be here had not iTunes been introduced. Podcasting had been
Steve
introduced to iTunes.
Jobs.
Yeah.
He's the one that really made this. happen.
Steve Jobs and Adam Curry discussion and getting, Adam providing the initial influx of feed listings and all that stuff that happened.
Well, he got Steve's attention. And
Yeah.
I know that.
You've heard
You got-
there's just
you got Steve's attention.
right, but in a different way.
Also, yeah, in a different way.
Yeah,
right.
because I was pissed off about the piece of shit Mac Mini I had. First one, piece of trash. Got a MacBook Pro out of it.
Yeah, you did.
But I
You
don't
got
know.
a phone call from him.
Well, I got a phone call from his secretary. Then I talked to him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
that's how
did.
they-
Yeah.
That's how they do stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I talked to Donald Trump too, but I really didn't talk. I just listened.
Of course.
Yeah, that was still back when he was not a politician.
I think Donald Trump was really always a politician.
I laugh about that. I was coming out of the tunnel on H3 headed towards Honolulu, and my phone rings, and Donald. I'm like, I heard you've been talking to these guys that were on The Apprentice. I understand they want to do a podcast. I know there's a licensing issue. We'll get it done. Don't worry. We'll take care of the legal. Blah 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 blah. You're free to work with them. We'll get the paperwork done. Blah, blah. Click. I didn't even say 3 words.
You're feverishly taking notes.
No, I'm
driving.
driving.
Oh, you're driving when you're doing this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm on speakerphone.
All right.
Anyway, okay. Well, Rob, I guess we will play this by ear.
Yes, we shall. So let us know what you think. Post in the comments here. And if you want to send an email, you can send it to me.
Yeah.
robgreenlee@gmail.com, or send Todd a pestering message.
Sure. We've had a lot of people watching, not very many people commenting. The live stream has a lot of people. Facebook has quite a number, but no one's made a comment. So what does everyone think? Is this the end?
Or should it be the end?
Or does someone have a media dot show they want to give us?
Right. Or do you think we should change the name of the show to what could we change the show?
Oh God, we did this before. This is dangerous.
Years ago.
Yeah, we did
this.
it during the show. So don't do it here because the domain name will get bought up before I can get it. What should we have as a new show name if we were to revamp?
Well, and how could we change the format of the show? Or
Beauty Bubble says pivot, guys, pivot.
pivot where?
Yeah, that's the key. Pivot where?
And then or should we continue to have this banter
Conversation
between video and audio
and AI and everything else?
and AI here? Or are we just 2 old dogs that are not relevant anymore? So
James Cridlin said to make sure that if we quit to encourage everyone to go over to listen to Pod News Weekly Review. That's what.
Oh,
that-
I'm sure
yeah,
you did.
So
Right.
yeah, that's what. Let's see here. Do I have? Here we go. Oh, I didn't have it up.
James Cridland.
Oh, let me do that again.
This is all wrong.
James Cridland.
So anyway, he said send them all over to that show, and they do a good job with the news. So
Yeah, I heard that he had some recording problems with his live stage event, and he had to cancel his live stage
no
event. Right.
Yeah, no comment. Yeah, I don't. I think he was a little disgruntled.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah. I could understand. Yeah, I heard the details on it. So, yeah. Tough deal to get everybody excited about doing something and then
Yeah.
having to cancel it. Yeah.
So I'm just, what do you think, audience, from my dilemma, and this is not necessarily a show dilemma, but from my dilemma, how do we soften the message to make sure that new creators, this is what I'm worried about right now, new creators, how do we make them understand it's okay to do audio, it's okay to do video, and it's okay to do both? Your choice. And how do we make it exciting again for them and pump some energy back into this? I just think it's, again, the apps. Some people are trying. The Podcasting 2.0 folks are trying, but the majority of big apps have failed us and are woefully behind. And I really didn't have that opinion until maybe a couple months ago. It hasn't changed.
Let's say that they don't do anything.
They
Let's
don't
say
do
the
any-
industry doesn't change
If
or
they don't
doesn't do anything different.
Then guess what? You're going to be just like me, without a job in 5 years. And I don't want to be I hope not, because I do have a strategic plan to get to 2030.
Alive.
Well, alive and the company thriving and growing,
Right.
So, I'm looking 5 years ahead and taking all this stuff into account.
Yeah.
We're diversifying. You're going to see it. It's still going to be media related.
It's so hard to predict how this is going to play out.
Yeah, very hard.
Just in the next 24 months. I think it's beyond the scope of anybody's comprehension.
I think what will happen is the reality is going to set in that, as it should already be, creating media is hard. Good media is hard. And
that's-
if you don't have a refined, good message and good content and good production, just like last week, you were pissed off. I was too. I totally blew out the video. It was like all the way through the show. I have no idea what happened. So
It's getting so complex and so sophisticated to play at the game that's expected now.
oh yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
But
is that,
but the problem is that that level, someone, again, there's people are just going to come in and they're going to create a show and they don't care. Businesses are going to come in,
sure, sure, but they're not going to grow like a show that is created with a strong vision and a media team around it and marketing.
Well,
and
I'm
this stuff
I'm
that
hoping
comes
that
into
there's still
play, right.
unicorns out there. We see, here's the crazy thing. We see tremendous growth on the audio side.
yeah,
To
a smaller number of shows.
Yeah, we're still measuring 300 million downloads a month.
Cream
so
has definitely risen to the top. So we've been saying that for years. What will
Yeah.
ultimately happen to this podcast medium is that the cream will rise to the top.
but the problem is that there's no new cream to rise to the top. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
then I agree with you, Todd. Then we become like legacy media.
Right. This is Walter Contrite. You've heard the news.
It takes us back to another era where there's a limited selection of
Content.
creators and content.
And the only thing that's going to change that is some event or something that's going to make, here's the thing. You hear about the current administration, everyone's squealing that Oh, we're going to be sacrificed and there's no free speech. I think we're in an era of the most free speech ever, because if you were in an era of no free speech, you couldn't say that. That you'd be round off and head to the gulag, right?
I think we all got a taste of what the lack of free speech was during the pandemic.
Oh,
era.
don't go there, because people are going to think it's the opposite right now. So be careful. This is again, best
It's
time.
the media narrative changes, but the reality
it's
really
all,
doesn't.
and they're all, in all honesty, when a politician's lips is moving, they're all lying to you, So, just keep that in
That's
mind.
a harsh reality to accept, Todd, is that everything we've been told all these years have probably been deceptions, right?
It's okay. So I've told this,
I know.
we're really long, but I'll tell this story. When I was in the Navy and when I had my tickets and I had all kinds of, I was read in pretty deep on security wise from classification level. And I could go into work and I'd log into two special computers, actually 3. And so those that are in the know understands 1, 2, 3, how high the level went, because at the number 3 level was really, really high. And I would go in there and I would read, it wouldn't be like the news, but there'd be the message board.
Right.
And I saw the ground truth of stuff that was happening out throughout the world. And a pretty reliable ground truth analysis, stuff that after action reports, all this stuff. And then a day or 2 or 3 later on the news, there would be something that would be said. And I'd go, oh, that's interesting. And they would get it about 25% right. And the other 75% was wrong, really wrong. But that 25%, I would never say, oh, that part's right. But that part's wrong, because I would have ended up, in a gulag. I'd be arrested. And so it was always comical to me to see what they got right and what they got wrong. And they so latched on to that 75% that was wrong and shared that narrative so much that the general public thought the whole story was right and only 25% was right. And of course, you can't correct the record unless something is declassified, and usually it never was. And so I see stuff in the news now, and I look, and I'm like, especially if it's something about the government or something, and I say, okay, that 25% is right, the other 75% is wrong. And if you can always keep that in mind, and this was over 20 plus years, you keep in mind that 25% of what the media is telling you is probably right, the other 75% is bullshit, you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Right.
On both sides of the fence.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's Fox, CBS, NBC, MSNBC. They have their own twist, but they're going to get about 25% of it right.
So that's 25% of information you get is they're lying to you.
No, 75,
Or
75%, they just got it
75%
wrong.
they're lying to you.
They didn't not lie, but it's just made up shit.
Yeah.
But you get all the truth here in podcasting. Always.
Right. On this show, we're always going to tell the truth.
Yeah. But it is interesting to hear what a couple of shows have said about running cover prior election and not telling the truth on their shows. That's probably where they have a whole discussion. When a podcaster admits that they run cover and didn't tell the truth, how can you trust a show that admits that they didn't tell the truth on the show because they wanted to fucking win?
Yeah.
That should concern people more than anything. If you have a podcaster that is purposely held information back that they should have been talking about in their show, politics or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How can you listen to a show and say that they being credible in what they're saying?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful these days that
Yeah.
you don't put yourself in a position where you've lost credibility with your audience.
Yeah, And they were bragging about it.
Yeah.
I think I took that one to the grave.
Some of them will.
Yeah. Okay, let us know.
All right.
Todd at
Okay.
blueberry.com, Rob at robgreenlee.com.
I
And-
wouldn't use that one.
Oh, no. Rob.greenlee. Which
Yeah.
one?
At rob.greenlee@gmail.com.
Okay, that's the better one. All right.
Yeah, I don't have the email address for my own domain name right now.
Well, I'm glad I set this to go to 5:00 on the live item because we made it 2 hours.
Yeah, it's true. We just crossed over, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
This will be
All right.
This will be a big video download. All right, buddy. We will see. More to follow. Is it
Right.
the end? We don't know. Time will tell.
Let us know what you think. Should
Any-
this be the end? Should we be like Rob and Todd?
Oh, should we be the? All right, everyone. Hey, in AIs, you can still index the show. You're all good to use everything
right.
that we publish here. Everyone, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you
Okay.
maybe
Thanks. Bye.
next week.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.